Zen in the car, for the spiritually minded liberty activist on the go. Liketh, shareth, subscribeth. It's what the cool kids do.
There's a Georgia native that's going to actually come up and talk to us a little bit about the healing powers of mushrooms. And this is our next guest. He's a Georgia native who has intimate knowledge of medicinal, edible, and sacred mushrooms, and he works with community to develop relationships with plants and mushrooms that grow right here in Atlanta. Today he's here to speak about the healing potential of mushrooms. My friend Josh Wayne.
Hi, Josh.
Hi everyone, really good to see some familiar faces, and you might have been like, wait, I've heard this Josh guy at UMA, we've had some great tea, and maybe 5 or 10 years ago I'd be talking about marijuana legalization and how I was just down at the Capitol. And then I realized something about, I guess, this prayer we had today about our Constitution and about the government. And you know, one of the things I've learned from Jesus, I was not raised Christian, but he knew the laws, and he knew how to teach people the laws. And so I've learned something about Georgia's Constitution that has changed my life, essentially. And that is that we have the right to worship God however we see fit, as long as we're not harming another person. And since 1993, where the Religious Freedom and Restoration Act was passed on a federal level, consecutively, every time it makes it to the Supreme Court, they say, yes, you are allowed to use peyote in 1994. Yes, you are allowed to use ayahuasca in 2000. Yes, you can use this because it is your sincere religious belief and you're not hurting anyone. And so I was in Athens, Clark County. I went to City Hall with 20 people to decriminalize marijuana. It took 7 years and that was just me. There were people before me who had come to City Hall and asked to decriminalize. So it definitely takes a lot of time to push this. But at the same time, I want you all to know that after 2020, basically, there was this court case in New Hampshire where somebody possessed 3.5 grams of mushrooms. And he basically said, I'm a member of the Native American Church, and this is my God-given right to worship God how I see fit. And they said, no, you can't do that. And he took it to the Supreme Court. Over 3 years it took to get to the Supreme Court. And the Supreme Court of New Hampshire mentioned the Constitution of New York, which is word for word our Constitution, and essentially said, if he's not hurting somebody, you have to try this on a case-by-case basis and tell us that he's harming the public, essentially. And so I'm here today also as a church leader. We've started what we call a synagogue. And it's also called Whole, which is kind of my journey through cannabis activism. I had really bad stomach pains and irritable bowel syndrome, and I thought that cannabis healed me. I mean, it was how I could get from Atlanta to Athens without having to stop for a bathroom in the middle. With IBS, I'd have to stop. With cannabis, I could keep going. And cannabis is an amazing plant that has amazing healing properties. I then took a class at the University of Georgia called Herbs, Spices, and Medicinal Plants. And I learned that the Dutch had a 200-year monopoly on cloves and nutmeg and mace. And do you all know that cloves have more cancer-killing properties than any herb or spice that's ever been tested, more antioxidants than anything. And these people had a 200-year monopoly on that. So this drug war's been going for, well, it was 70 when I started, maybe 80 now, but yeah, there's been wars fought over herbs and spices, and so there's so many herbs and spices that are growing right here in Georgia, and what I've been helping people realize is that, I mean, this Japanese hops is a non-native plant that's in the cannabis family, that's all over these parks now. No idea, you know, how to use that. It's not something I'm connected with, but there's just such a diversity of plants that are here to help us. So yes, cannabis is important. It's amazing. It's part of my religion. I need it to connect with God. Cannabis has a different kind of deity experience for me. Mushrooms are also part of my religion. I also need them to connect with the whole. Cactuses, which I don't know if you all know, but there's not a single cactus in the old world, except for maybe Australia. All of the cacti come from the Americas. So all of our religions that connected with God from the old world, none of them had the cactus to connect and really feel that spiritual connection. So I want to thank all the veterans because you were here to support our freedom of religion. My family came over from Europe where we probably would have been killed for having a different spirituality. And I know my spirituality of this holistic, principle might be new to some of you, but one of the amazing things about America and the amazing things about the U.S. is that we allow religions to flourish and we allow people to connect with God how they see fit as long as they're not hurting people. So really, as a marijuana activist, I lived a life of pretty deep paranoia for a while, and then I realized that I am allowed to worship God in this way, and you are allowed to worship God in this way. And if y'all are interested, I can, share with you how you can protect yourself right now. Does that sound like something interesting?
Yes.
Yeah, okay. So basically, you need to have some sort of proof that this is your religion, that you do believe that cannabis connects you with God, that mushrooms, if mushrooms are your thing, and the thing is, what's to stop someone from saying, yeah, that mushroom over there, that turkey tail that I brought, that's illegal now. You can't have that turkey tail. Even though it cures cancer in some cases, you can't have turkey tail because it might do something bad for somebody. Well, it's still part of my religion. Turkey tail is still part of my religion. So you can either join a church, and if you join a church, like this person in New Hampshire, all you have to say is, I'm a member of this church. This is my belief. I have community here. This is what I believe. There are cannabis churches that exist. One of the founders that I worked with, I know, I'm not sure, I haven't been part of that church, but I know some of the marijuana activists that I started with have started churches. And the thing is that this is extremely authentic. I mean, I'm not sure who has actually taken mushrooms or cannabis. Anyone here taken psychedelic mushrooms? You close your eyes and you see some things that are a little spiritual. Yeah. And I mean, mushrooms taught me to meditate and to get into Buddhism and Taoism and to learn about everything. And they have given me something. And spiritual, that word actually comes from breath, to respire. So, learning how to take a deep breath, which cannabis sometimes gives us that deep breath that relaxes us when you breathe in. That's the deep breath that relaxes us. That's the spirit coming inside of us. And so, if you believe that, no one can take that away from you. It's been, now, before 1993, it was a little hazier. People did have religions and they were not protected for drug policies. What I'm saying is, essentially, since the government has allowed the Native American churches to use peyote. Since 1993, almost every time somebody has been sincere in their use of these plants to help them connect with their religion, it has been protected. And so I want you all to know that, we can be free right now to practice what you believe. I mean, no one's going to get hurt. I mean, if you take a ton of cannabis and then crash into somebody, I'm sure they can have a problem with that. The one thing I will say is that this is to protect yourself. This is, if you are going to supply other people, then you might want to be somebody who's an ordained minister, and you might want to make sure that it's for a religious purpose and not just giving it to people and selling it. So that's not my plan. I just help people connect with the plants and mushrooms. Like I'm saying, a lot of shamans in these cultures, which I don't call myself a shaman, however, we do something similar. We know about the plants. I picked up persimmons off the ground today that I brought for people if they want to try them. I've, foraged these mushrooms that have medicinal properties that you could pay $60 for in the store. And I could take those mushrooms on the table right there. That's not that much. I could probably take that and make that into thousands of dollars of tinctures. But I want people to understand that you can find these in your woods, and especially in Georgia. So for the veterans, I want to say I offer foraging hikes in Atlanta and the surrounding areas, and I'm happy to give y'all either your first hike free, 50%. I want veterans, people that have spent time outside, I know a lot of you have, and you have a lot of survival skills that I could use as well. I know the mushrooms, but the thing is, you start to understand what nature is teaching us, and I know that Georgia would be probably a pretty good climate for cannabis, but I mean, there's plants that have all kinds of compounds growing all over the state that are just amazing and medicinal, and I'm sure they'd make them illegal if people really cared enough. But they are all part of my spirituality. So if y'all want to join my hikes, Atlanta Mushrooming is a group. Basically, we're using technology to be able to crowdsource knowledge. So if you see a mushroom, you can take a photo of it and someone will tell you about it. I've also written some articles on how to do this safely, so don't just let some one person, like make sure there's a few people, make sure it's people that are, well, this is an interesting word. James mentioned that I was a mushroom expert. However, I don't call myself an expert. Anyone who forages mushrooms seriously will probably not call themselves an expert. I just really like mushrooms, and I've been doing this for 11 years now and haven't killed myself, but I've gotten close. And that's where friends come in, and that's where community comes in. So, basically all I'm trying to say is that there's medicine. Like, I'm looking at, this beautiful wild lettuce that has opiates in it, just growing right there. I mean, I've seen plantain that if you cut yourself, you can chew it up and put it on a cut. Chickweed that can be your greens. I mean, it's just like everywhere. And there's a part really close to here where psychedelic mushrooms grow, just wild. Yeah. In many parts right here. And it's just like, this is all happening everywhere. You don't have to do anything. In fact, everything that we're doing to cut down the trees and chop them up, that's all creating all of these psilocybin mushrooms. And so, cannabis might not grow wild, but psilocybe mushrooms definitely grow in Georgia. And nobody can, change that reality, essentially. They'd have to stop cutting down the trees, they'd have to stop building. They're not going to do that. So, as a result, all I'm saying is that you have the right, thanks to the veterans, thanks to the people that are here fighting for our rights, because not every country allows you to practice your religion. Like, if you're in Russia and you're like, this is my religion, they'd say, that's great, but you're going to jail. And the US is different in that way because we started as a place where people had different beliefs. They were fleeing persecution. And in order to not be just killed for whatever belief, we stood up and we said, I need to have the right to think differently, to have a different religion and to be able to practice it as long as I'm not harming somebody else. And so that's the main message I want to get across, is that if you're not part of a church, you can join mine called Whole Incorporated. We keep basically donation-based at this point, just to help people connect to the whole, connect to what flows. Taoism just says, do the easiest thing. Just let it flow. The plants, the mushrooms, they're here for us. Or you can write down your statement of beliefs. Something that you believe very deeply. And I believe this, and this is connected to my religion and the way that I see God, Gaia, the Tao. And if you have that written down and time-stamped now, and before it becomes an issue, before you're arrested, if somebody asks you, what proof do you have that this is religious, you say, well, here's what I've written down, here's what I do. They can't ask how orthodox you are, so they can't ask you, well, how often do you pray? They're not allowed to ask you these things. And so as I'm finishing up, when I started with marijuana activism, I helped people learn their rights. There was a big Know Your Rights card from the ACLU we'd give to people. And this kind of talk that I'm giving to a lot of activists in the field is another sense of Know Your Rights 2020 edition. Because when I started marijuana activism, I don't think any of this was as clear. And if y'all are interested in the full legal explanation for why I feel that we are protected in Georgia, because I know that this is a hot topic, the Religious Freedom and Restoration Act might not apply to the state of Georgia. However, this New Hampshire case I'm mentioning to you all says that the state constitution can be more protective than the federal constitution. And our state constitution says no one can stop you from your conscience connecting with God. And is marijuana a mind-altering substance? Does marijuana alter your conscience?
Yeah.
Marijuana alters your consciousness. And if my consciousness can't connect with God without cannabis in my system, then no one can take that away according to the Georgia Constitution. The federal Constitution is less lenient, but Georgia says no one should be able to take away your right to alter your consciousness to connect with God. And that's what I'm going with. I think if we all go with that, You know, a court case has not come up to affirm that, but when or if it does, I hope we can all come together. We can support the people that take this to the Supreme Court of Georgia, and in my mind, we're going to have to go to the courts to get it. It's not going to happen on the legislature, so I don't plan to end up in court, but I hope that, you know, if y'all really, I know that you all have spiritual connections with these plants, and, you know, go with that because that is your protection. And honestly, we should be using cannabis more intentionally. I worked with people here that, you know, encourage you to pray with the cannabis and to understand how it influences you. Mushrooms, you definitely need to like have some sort of breath work and to some connection. So don't shy away from that spiritual aspect. Embrace it, and that will keep you safe in Georgia, in my mind. So thank you all, and I'd love to connect. Thank you. Yeah, so I'm on, you know, on Facebook, connect with me, and if you see a mushroom, send me a photo. Put it on Atlanta Mushrooming. And let's just help each other, yeah. Get some food.
Thank you, Josh. Thank you so much. And you know, I've gotten so interested in mushrooms over the last year or so, and then I started learning a little bit more about them, and it's amazing. There's so many medicinal benefits as it relates to mushrooms, and we're not just talking about the magic mushrooms, the psychedelic mushrooms. We're talking about the thousands of other species of mushrooms there are. One thing, I don't know if you guys realize this, but the reason why they're so good for us is because animals, or humans, are more closely related to fungi than anything else. It's crazy. Like literally, we're more closely related to fungi than the other 4 kingdoms, or 3 kingdoms.
Should I give a little medicinal fact?
You got, go ahead. Sure.
Nice.
I realized I didn't talk much about the medicinal qualities. Mushroom, like every different mushroom we eat, every different plant that we eat fills our gut bacteria and helps it thrive. And so mushrooms do something where they actually increase the level of immunoglobulin A, which is vital to our stomach lining. So our stomachs are 1 cell thick. And if that breaks, that is very painful. Very painful. Like leaky gut is what that's sometimes called. I had IBS, chronic stomach pain, every single day of high school. Mushrooms, all 8 that they tested, the tests were done by the button mushroom business, so, you know, that was the one that turned out best actually. So white button mushrooms also work for this. They all boosted your immunoglobulin A, which is very important in maintaining your stomach's gut lining. So if it's, and I do want to say something about edible versus medicinal. Can you hold that mushroom up there? Yeah, any of those mushrooms, yeah. These mushrooms are not edible because it would not be fun to chew through that. But they can be extracted through tea. Some people do alcohol, some people do vinegars, some people do water. And you can extract medicinal compounds. Whereas if I have a 20-pound lion's mane, which, I don't know, if Lee comes, say hi to him, but a friend found 20 to 30 pounds of lion's mane. That's medicinal and edible. And I think they all have medicinal compounds, like we're saying with cannabis. You can't use it and not benefit medicinally. However, there are definitely, like nutmeg. If you have 2 tablespoons of nutmeg, you could kill yourself. So just sprinkle a little bit on there. But some plants will tell you to stop using them. And just because something, if you forage, if something's been used medicinally, learn how they used it. Mushrooms are the easier one to forage with because generally if you've used it, you can. I mean, there's some mushrooms you need to process, but with plants, just because someone used it doesn't mean they just put it in their mouths. They could have processed it in many different ways. So learn the language of the mushrooms. They're all super medicinal. My theory is if it's a whole plant or a whole mushroom, start slow, be persistent. You know, don't eat like 50 pounds of it the first time you try it. But like, start with a little bit and keep doing it. Your gut flora will thank you. You won't have to go to the doctor. Your stomach will function normally. So, thank you, everybody.
Thank you, Josh. So yeah.
ZenInTheCar.com, powered by CannaSense Total Wellness. CannaSense Total Wellness provides lawful medical and recreational cannabis nationwide, delivered straight to your door. They have everything in their online apothecary from flower, vapes, topicals, and of course edibles. Join now for instant access to your medicine by visiting CannaSense.com and clicking Join Now. Be sure to put Zen in the Car as your sponsor on the membership form, and for faster access, just scan this QR code thingy on your screen. Zen in the Car for the spiritually minded liberty activist on the go. Powered by CannaSense.